Hello, everyone. Today I'm going to be teaching Owen about sexual differentiation. Just so you guys get a better feel for who he is, before this lesson, I asked him a couple questions just to assess his background. And so the first was, what is your zodiac? Just because it's a fun little fact, and he's an Aries. I asked him what grade he was in and if he's ever taken biology, and he said he's in the 10th grade and he's only taken environmental bio, and he can't tell me what he learned except that the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. And then I asked him what do the word sexual differentiation means to him, and he said it's the difference between sexes. And then I asked him what his least and most favorite thing to do is, and where does learning about sexual differentiation fall. He said that his least favorite thing to do is homework, and his most favorite thing to do is sleep. And learning about sexual differentiation lands him at about a 3. And his response was, I thought you were going to interview me about my life. And then the next question I asked him is, what determines a person's sex? And he said their genitals, sex organs, and the levels of testosterone in their bodies, estrogen on the female side, even though they have a little bit of testosterone. And I thought this was a surprisingly intuitive answer, given a person that's never taken biology. And then the last question I asked is, what do you hope to learn in this lesson? And he said he hoped to learn about sexual differentiation. So I have a couple learning objectives that I have to accomplish by the end of this presentation slash lesson. And they are, I want you to be able to understand that there are different levels of sexual differentiation. I want you to have a broad understanding of how sexual differentiation occurs. I want you to recognize a pattern between male and female sexual differentiation. And I want you to be able to apply the concepts in this lesson. And my big goal is to keep Owen engaged, even though this falls at about a 3 of excitement for him. So, also Owen, you're gonna take a quiz at the end of this, so I'd pay attention. So the first thing I wanted to tell him is that there's 5 levels of sexual differentiation. The first is genetic, gonadal, hormonal, phenotypic, and behavioral/brain. So, Owen, when I say genetic, does that mean anything to you?
Yeah, like your genetics, like what you inherit from your parents.
That's perfect. That's a perfect answer. So when I Googled it, I find a very basic definition. It says relating to genes or hereditary. So essentially, as humans, we have 22 chromosomes, autosomes, so our genetic information for our body, and then we have a pair of sex chromosomes. If you are genetically female, you are XX, and if you are genetically male, you are XY. Does this all seem familiar to you?
Yeah, I remember learning about that.
Okay. So the first thing that we're going to look at are XY males. So this is what the Y chromosome looks like. It's circled in green. And on the Y chromosome, there is this gene called the SRY gene. In contrast, females have 2 X chromosomes, and there is no SRY gene. While there's other things on the X chromosome, that's not important to us for this lesson of sexual differentiation. So this is just them side by side. To review, males have an SRY gene on their Y chromosome, and on either of the X chromosomes, there's no SRY gene. So the SRY gene has implications for the gonadal sex, which is our second level of sexual differentiation. So does the word gonads mean anything to you?
No.
So gonads are sex or reproductive glands. And does that mean anything to you, like reproductive glands?
Yeah, like how people reproduce, if they have kids.
Like what?
Like how people reproduce.
Right, exactly. Can you think of 2 things, either male or female, that people use or that are reproductive glands?
Well, like sperm and like an egg.
So I think what you're alluding to are the ovaries and the testes, which is what we'll be talking about today. For males, genetic males, the SRY gene turns this undifferentiated gonad, which I'm going to refer to as neutral, so it's not more male or more female typical, into the testes. Can you see this properly?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Now it's into the testes. And for genetic females, the lack of an SRY gene turns this undifferentiated gonad into an ovary. So this is just them side by side.
Mm.
Our next level of sexual differentiation is hormonal. Does the word hormone have any meaning to you?
You know, like our hormones, like people,
Can you think of any?
like name like a hormone.
So the definition of hormones are a signaling molecule produced in an organism that circulates through the body to stimulate specific tissue cells or tissues into action. That's a mouthful, but in this context,
You feel like hormonal.
hmm,
Like a person could feel
a person can feel what?
like hormonal.
Well, I guess what you're referring to is the presence of a certain level of hormones can have a behavioral implication. So when people are saying they're feeling hormonal, it could be the rise of a certain hormone that's eliciting a certain behavior. But in this context, we're going to be talking about the hormones that are significant to sexual differentiation. And for XY males, the testes produce testosterone and anti-Mullerian hormone. Whereas the ovaries, in this case, there are no hormones that are important to the rest of this lesson. So all you have to know is ovary produces nothing that we care about right now, and the testes produce testosterone and anti-Mullerian hormone.
Okay.
And this leads us to our phenotypic level of sexual differentiation. And phenotypes are observable characteristics of an individual. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. I think in this context, before we've been starting with XY males, I think in this context, it's more intuitive to start with females. An XX female does not produce, remember, any hormones of importance to the sexual differentiation that we care about. No testosterone or anti-Mullerian hormone allows for the development of two things that we care about: the ducts and the external genitalia. The lack of a hormone allows the further development of Mullerian ducts.
Yeah.
And externally, like female typical external genitalia. So for males, there's a couple, it's slightly more complicated. So remember, males produce testosterone and anti-Mullerian hormone. That's what their testes produce. And the testosterone causes the development of Wolffian ducts. And in external genitalia, testosterone is locally converted to this hormone called DHT, which is just think of it as a stronger version of testosterone, and it causes the development of male typical external genitalia. And then they also produce anti-Mullerian hormone, and that just kills a slightly underdeveloped Mullerian duct that is present in. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So a note on phenotypes. I just want to let you know that even though a person is expressing testosterone or a lack of hormones that allow the development of external genitalia, it's not like the presence of or lack of those things create a female or male stereotypical genitalia. It does exist on a spectrum. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Behavioral. Remember, the testes produce testosterone. And testosterone goes to the brain, circulates and lands in the brain, and in specific areas that I don't think is very important for this lesson. And testosterone is locally converted to estrogen, male brains, and that causes the masculinization of the brain. I just want you to appreciate the irony that we always talk about estrogen in a very female context, but estrogen is actually responsible for the masculinization of the brain.
Okay.
You're so bored. Okay. And then for the XX females, their ovaries produce nothing of importance that we care about for sexual differentiation, which allows for the further development. The lack of any signal allows for the further feminization of the brain.
Okay.
So I just want to go back to your answer on what determines a person's sex. So you said their genitals, their sex organs, and the levels of testosterone in their bodies, and estrogen on the female side, even though they have a little bit of testosterone.
Well, I guess like you said, didn't you say like males have a little bit of estrogen also?
Yes, exactly. Estrogen is testosterone is locally converted in the brain to estrogen to masculinize the brain. But also, we have not mentioned estrogen, circulating estrogen in the body of females. So that just raises the question: what about estrogen? Right?
Yeah.
So turns out that what we were talking about mostly is the sensitive period of sexual differentiation, and that's happening during like a little bit before and after birth. And then, much later, testosterone and estrogen circulating within the body. In the case of females, estrogen has this sort of activational effect that allows the person to develop secondary sex characteristics. So, estrogen has an effect for sex differentiation much later down the line, closer to adulthood, around puberty.
Okay.
Okay. So, do you have any questions?
No.
You have 0 questions.
Yeah.
Okay. So, quiz time. Okay. So, I want you to, can you see all the word banks or is my face on top of something?
Estrogen, false, testes, and testosterone. You can't see the words.
Blank secretes testosterone and anti-Mullerian hormone.
Oh, testes.
Yes. Blank is converted to blank to masculinize the brain.
Um, testosterone is converted to estrogen.
Whoop, whoop. Sex is determined by phenotypic properties.
Um, okay, so that's false.
Last one's true.
Yeah.
Okay. Now here's a short answer question, and this one's kind of hard. What happens if someone were to only have an X chromosome and nothing else, just one X chromosome?
I don't know. Would they be like male or female?
Well, I mean, we just talked about 5 levels of sexual differentiation. So maybe it would be easier to address one at a time. So genetically, they are just X and nothing else, right?
Okay.
Okay. So then the next is gonadal,
Okay.
right? What happens gonadally if they just have an X chromosome?
What happens if they just? I don't know.
You don't know. Okay. So with the X, so when a person is XY genetically, the Y chromosome is important
Because that's what like makes the male. Because it's
right, because it expresses the SRY gene.
X would be female.
Okay, so they would be female on a gonadal level because there's no input of the Y chromosome.
Okay.
Okay. And then what happens hormonally?
I don't know. Would they just not have hormones?
So hormonally, remember, if there's no Y chromosome, then they don't produce testosterone or anything. They produce, like, we don't care about the hormones that they produce because they're not very important to sexual differentiation.
Okay.
So essentially, what happens is that on every single level, they are female typical because they don't have the input of the Y chromosome.
Okay.
Okay, that is everything. Did you have fun?
Yeah. Yeah.
A scale of homework to sleep, where would you put it now?
A 7.
The same?
No, I said a 7.
You put it at a 7?
Yeah.
Like it's close to sleep? Like you would do this before you went to sleep?
No.
Okay.
For the purposes of your project, yeah.
What?
For the purposes of your project, then yeah.
Aw, thank you.
You're welcome.
Bye.